Hey guys, this is Phil Galfond for BlueFirePoker.com, and this is part 2 of 2 of this session. I played at 10-20 no limit, picking up right where we left off. To remind people, I guess, I mean, if you haven't watched the first, you definitely should. But this player over here, Dog11, is someone who I believe to be a strong aggressive regular from just based on Neiman's videos that he played with him. Tell a Friend seems to be a fish. I've taken some notes on him as far as open limping, making really small 3-bets. He open limped and cold called a 3-bet, a large 3-bet with Ace King suited. Just something to note. Smitty, I remember something about c-betting boards a little bit too frequently, boards that are not so good for the preflop raiser. And D-Rock had an interesting 3-bet squeeze that doesn't tell us too much about him unless it comes into play later in 3-bet situations. To review again, I decided to table without a HUD because I wanted to, I wanted to develop reads on players through note-taking and observing their hands. And here on the left is a pretty big hand. I actually do remember watching this. I missed, actually at the time and right now, I missed, excuse me, missed the way that it went down, but I remember reviewing it. Again, I apologize, I still have a cough, and I will keep coughing. So D-Rock gets in a river check raise there. I believe the action was GHTH raises, gets called, bets 3 streets, and gets check raised on the river. And you actually can't learn too much about D-Rock based on that. I think he played the hand entirely standardly, for the most part. Here on the left, I decided not to c-bet with Jack-9 suited into 2 people. I think it's too likely that D-Rock's range in the blinds to call a raise. It contains a lot of pocket pairs, and it's a flop that people can make. Excuse me. People can make moves on you. Also, if it does get checked through, I'm able to represent some high cards that I don't have. Also, have the potential to improve with a Jack or a 9. So back to that hand, I think that I'm going to pull it up in a second, yeah. So GHGH bet twice, got called twice by Queen Jack with Queen of Clubs. I think that that's up to this point standard on both parts. And then on the river, I guess I closed it because I saw the river, or was paying attention to the river action. On the river, D-Rock check raises, which is the standard play, and GHTH called, which, even though he had the second nuts, I think is a pretty poor call. Unless he knows something about D-Rock that I don't, which is entirely possible, but it's a spot where it's pretty likely that it's very likely that you have a flush yourself as GHGH, or that that you have the nut flush. So it's not a spot where it's not like a spot in PLO where somebody can have blockers and make a move on you. He can't have blockers. If he has the Queen of Clubs, that means he has the nuts. So he can't know that you don't have the nuts unless he does have it himself. So I don't think it's a spot people check raise bluff that often. And the note I took, though, sorry, I shouldn't say it's a terrible call. It's a call I might make occasionally, and I'd expect a lot of players do make, but it's still important to note that he called with the second nuts there, and didn't take super long, I think, to do so. It might indicate that he overvalues or puts a little too much emphasis on absolute hand strength rather than relative hand strength. Where, his Jack high flush there is exactly the same as a 7 high flush. except that he wouldn't. Excuse me, that he wouldn't bet a 7-high flush. All right, so here I have 9-7 suited on both tables, so something good has to happen. On the left, I flop an open-ender and a flush draw. In a 4-way pot, pre-flop raiser bets, which to me means pretty strong range. And D-Rock raises. Alright, so 2 tough spots here. On the left, let's talk about the left first since we were talking about it. I don't think... I'm really sorry, guys. I don't think that D-Rock has... I don't think D-Rock's folding. Ever, ever, ever. I don't think he's raise folding when thousandaire bets into 3 other people on a board this drawy. So, he has a very strong hand. To me, that means sets, very big combo draws, King Jack of Hearts, Ace Jack of Hearts, or a straight, Jack 9. Even though I have, you know, good equity against a set, I guess, or decent equity against a set, I'm never getting him to fold, and I don't think I have enough equity to get my stack in here. So the alternative is calling, but I think it's too likely that thousandaire might shove with, let's say, like Ace Jack of Hearts or a set, and I obviously can't get it in 3-way because then it's too likely I'm up against a higher flush draw and a straight, so I'd be completely dead, or a higher flush draw and a set, so so I'm drawing to like just a couple outs essentially. I think I just have to fold here, which is painful, but just the right play. I mean, it's too likely that they both have big hands, and so likely that D-Rock's not folding. So I have very little fold equity, and just don't really have equity against a reasonable range to continue here. Haven't even heard from the short stack yet. You know, he could wake up with Jack 9 or whatever. Ace X of Hearts. I'm just in bad shape against most hands. Here on the right, tell a friend limps, which he's been doing. I have these notes on him right here. Thousandaire raises to 100, which I've seen him do at least once, I think more than once, before this. So I decided to 3-bet. I think that I think it's a profitable play, and I have a pretty good hand for it. I don't think this is quite good enough to call 100 out of the blinds. It might be, considering Telefriend's probably going to call and probably is a weak player, but I prefer to just 3-bet it and hopefully take it down pre-flop, or, you know, potentially take it down post-flop. I flop bottom pair and a bunch of backdoor draws, and even though I bottom pair, I want to c-bet here, I think, because it's just a really good board for c-betting. Any hand like Ace-Jack, things like that are folding. I gotta get him... I'd rather him fold, or either of them fold a hand like Queen 10 than see a free card with it. Another benefit is that thousandaire could call with a hand like, let's say 10s, and then there are a few turns. I mean, I guess 10s isn't the best example. Let's say King 10, King Jack, whatever. I'm giving him a pretty strong hand. Let's just say he can call with some hands, and fold some turns when I shove. And I'm not shoving most turns, but I will be shoving any diamond and any turn that gives me an open-ender. And obviously any combo draw. So I'm taking the note that tell a friend limp cold called there. Sorry, I'm a little embarrassed I couldn't think of hands that thousandaire could call the flop with and then fold the turn. I guess 10s are possible. The problem with 10s is that some of my semi-bluff turns are then good for 10s, like a 10, for instance, or even a 6 he might decide to go with. But 10s is a possibility. He also might get 10s in pre-flop with me, though I guess actually we're a little too deep for that. So I bet, and they both call. Turn bricks off, and I think you can't do anything else but check fold. If someone said that they think this is a shove here, I wouldn't yell at them. I don't really yell, but I wouldn't disagree super strongly. Like it does look really strong. You should be getting folds from any, like, Thousandaire could potentially even fold a hand like King Jack if he's a tight, observant type player. But with Telefriend in the hand, and I don't know how weak or strong a player he is, potentially pretty weak one, I don't think he's going to fold a king, or no reason to think he'd fold a king that often. I do only have 5 outs. There's a strong possibility somebody's slow playing. Strong meaning, somewhat possible. So I think it's just check fold, pretty standard. And I'm taking the notes on him that he limp called there, ace king of clubs, just called on the king 8-7 flop, and then shoved the turn, deuce clubs turn. All of that. And I said this a lot in the first half of this session, the first video, that a lot of the notes I take aren't general statements or necessarily will apply to other situations that easily. But what I like to do is just basically in notes I write down facts, not opinions so much. If I do write opinions, I put question marks or whatever. But rather than writing he's a fish or he's stupid, I write things that he's done. And later on I can look at all those and make my mind up on whether he is a fish or he is stupid, but also then, have examples of things he's done. And the ideal goal is to develop a good understanding of what's going through his head when he makes plays, because if you can see what he's done with certain hands on certain boards, you can start to make good guesses at the reasons that he's making those plays. And so anything that's that's at all non-standard, I like to take notes on. Alright, so here on the left I call him min-raise in the big blind with Queen Jack offsuit. You could 3-bet, but whatever. I think a call is standard. I decided to lead a King 7-3 rainbow board. Obviously it's one of those boards where you don't get a lot of credit, but at the same time people aren't going to have very much, so what are they going to do about it? I do have 2 overs to, 7 or 3 or 8s or something like that to hit. I have the backdoor straight draw. And somebody's going to bet if I checked, and I think it's a little too much to invest to check raise. So I think that works in a vacuum. Obviously, you can't go crazy with it. Queen 10 offsuit here. I decided to fold in the small blind. I'd call it in the big blind with all the pot odds, but the min raise is a little frustrating because you feel like you want to play all these hands, but you're going to end up out of position with a weaker range than his, and you get a little bit of pot odds pre-flop, but beyond that, you're losing in every other category. Call here with Jack 10 suited is totally standard for me. I could 3-bet, but I prefer to have a little bit weaker of a hand, Jack 10 offsuit or like 9-7 suited, or sorry, like 9-6 suited even. He checks his flop, and I decide to check back and bet a lot of turns, but he doesn't let me. He bets, so I'm going to fold. I think it's pretty likely that he had a hand that was trying to induce some kind of bet from me, or a hand that didn't want to bet but was didn't want to bet but was calling a bet from me anyways. Seven 9 offsuit, a little thin. I decided to fold this one. I've been opening kind of wide. And though I don't have a HUD up right now to know my actual stats, I'm pretty sure I'm playing fairly loose, especially from late position. And I'd assume a lot of these guys are using HUDs and can tell that I'm playing loose. So, I have a little fear of them starting to play back at me more. So I want to tone down the pre-flop game a little bit. Six 8 suited under the gun. It's iffy, but I like to raise the suited connectors, or one gappers even under the gun, just because otherwise I think your range is too strong, and boards that come low, or your range is too high card weighted. Excuse me. I'm going to keep coughing forever. I would really like to stop coughing. For your sake and my sake. Alright, same situation again with Queen 10 offsuit. Exact same, I believe. Yeah. So hopefully I stay consistent and fold again. Fives I'll obviously open. I get 3-bet here, and it's weird, actually, I don't remember this hand, but I hope I folded. I think that 5 just plays too badly. Like, you can call, but I think it's too likely that he's 3-betting light, and then I don't get a lot of value when I hit my set. I think the best play here is just to fold. And I believe I said this in the first video, but the way I like to combat people 3-betting me in position is just 4-betting a lot. I don't like to call all that much. Okay, I did call. I don't like that call. It's not terrible. We are a little bit deep, and if he does happen to have a big hand and I flop my set, I get a lot of money, but sorry, I'm like backtracking now and trying to defend my play. I don't like it. I think it's a fold. He checks behind the flop, which is somewhat interesting. I think have a lot of like ace highs, mid pair type stuff. When he bets again, I still think he has a lot of like ace king, ace queen, but whoa, okay. That was a bad call. What am I doing? Alright, hold on. I guess I knew I was going to river set this hand because that's the only explanation for the way I played it. Back to the turn. I remember what I was thinking on the turn now. Now I remember this hand. I was thinking that, and to be honest with you guys, I was doing a few things at this point in the recording. I started the recording doing nothing, but a lot of people started talking to me, and some games popped up, so I was pretty busy towards the end of it. I should probably just close aim when I make videos from now on, which I'll probably do. But, I don't think actually the video suffers for it since I am focusing while reviewing the play. Anyways, what I was thinking at the time, I do remember pretty well, is that he would bet the turn. I thought it was pretty likely he was 3-betting air, and then betting the turn with any gut shot or better. Which, ace king, ace queen, which I definitely think is true. But beyond ace king, ace queen, I was thinking hands like, just like king 8, 8-3 suited, things like that, 9-3 suited. And the truth is, I don't think he would check those back. Looking at it now, I don't think he'd check those back on a jack 7-6 rainbow board. Just people in position c-bet those dry boards or dryish boards with most of their air. So I think I should have folded this turn for sure. Luckily I hit the river, which I guess was my plan. And I check. He pretty quickly bets 900 and 988. So the question is now call or shove. And, what am I beat by? I don't think he slow plays. I mean, he occasionally slow plays a set on the flop of jacks. That's somewhat rare. Set of tens, very, very possible. If I'm beat, I think set of tens is by far the most likely hand. The other possibility is like an 8-9 or 3-4, but I think both of those bet the flop. 8-4, I guess, also possible, but I think that bets the flop too. Anyways, I think straights are pretty unlikely, though possible. I think tens are somewhat likely, though, very few hand combos of tens, and he might not 3-bet that pre-flop. He might, but he might not. I just think it's, super likely that he has, like, weak jack that he's, that he checked behind for pot control and now is betting twice for value, or some kind of turn to river 2 pair. More likely turn, since there's only 1 5 left. And hopefully just won't believe me, because, I think this is a good semi-bluff, or sorry, check-raise bluff spot for me, and one that people check-raise bluff a lot. They have a hand like 7-8 of clubs here. Check, check, flop, check, call, turn, realize they don't want to call the river, decide to shove it. So, I think there's enough value in shoving here. I think probably some of you are looking at it and thinking, obviously it's a shove, you have a set, but you really do have to think about what hands will pay you off. Um, and even though I did end up shoving and think it was the right play, and it did end up, results-wise being correct, I think that it's a closer spot than some of you might realize, just because there aren't a ton of thin value bets in his range there. Given that, aces, kings, queens bets the flop, ace jack, king jack bets the flop, ace 10 probably doesn't bet the river, or at least that big and that confidently. And, so you're really looking at two pairs like he did have the 10-7 there, and I took a note on it. He did have two pair, which is the most likely hand I think I get paid off by. But, it is very possible that I was beat there. But, all it comes down to is when you're called, are you good more than half the time? And I felt that I would be. So I call with ace-3 offsuit in the big blind there to a min raise. I think that's fine. He's going to be opening really wide, and I have good pot odds pre-flop. Pretty confident in, being able to show down my hand when it's best, at least some of the time. So he bets twice. I think with my gutter and ace high, I think he has enough flush draws, 7-8, like queen 5, random stuff in his range that. Oh, I don't think I fold here, do I? All right, I think I can call a turn there. I don't. It's funny, I'm disagreeing with a lot of my plays, but I think I can call a turn there. If he does have a hand like 8s, then whatever, I lose a small amount. I have 4 5s to improve and 3 aces, and I think it's just somewhat likely I'm ahead. And yes, he is going to bluff me off my hand sometimes on the river, but I don't know. I kind of trust myself to make some good decisions on the river. And yes, I don't have a lot of implied odds. Probably more in the way of reverse implied odds, because if I do hit my 5 and a lot of money goes in, I'm probably beat. But I still think I should have called there. That 5's hand was so stupid. I think I played it really badly, and then made mistakes on 2 streets, and then obviously was super lucky. But I guess plenty of people win that way, at least for a little while. Here with 9s in the big blind, I think we're a little too deep. 9s doesn't play that well in 3-bet pots to 3-bet, so I think I just call here. Take a flop. I have somewhat disguised hand. Alright, if you remember earlier, this is. Okay, I had a lot going through my mind during this hand. And might have, I don't know, confused myself. Remember earlier with Queen Jack on a King 7 deuce in this exact same scenario, I was in the big blind, 1000er min raise, D-Rock called. I bet, and they both folded. Now, I think they're both multi-tabling. But I still think that that's something that you notice. I think when people get led into on a board that dry, they kind of get annoyed. And I'm sure one of them, had like whatever jack high and just looked at the board, looked at me, got mad, folded. So I think that's in the back of their mind. So I think there's some value in a lead here. And the reason I'm leading is that, this isn't a board that I expect to get, there aren't a lot of worse hands that can call me down, but I was trying to get a worse hand. I was trying to get somebody to float and bluff me later in the hand, because I thought it was very likely somebody would either make a small bluff raise now, and yes, it'll get tricky for me on later streets, or that they would float with a hand like 6-7 or something, and then make at least one bluff later on. And I was pretty committed to calling down on most turns and rivers in this spot, and that's not something, sorry, actually, I want to stop myself there. I hate when people say that, when they say, alright, I'm going to do this and then do this on the turn and river. That's not what I mean. I never like to make a commitment to playing a hand a certain way before I get the information on the turn and river. That's just stupid to make a decision now when you can make it later with more information. What I meant by that was that in most cases, on most turns and most rivers, against most bets, different bet sizes, or like most things that the opponent can do, I felt like I was going to be calling down a lot of the time. He raises to 200. And this is a weird spot. You know, I don't expect that he has a ton of threes in his range to raise in the cutoff. Definitely has some. Like, definitely ace-3 suited, king-3 suited, 3-4 suited, 3-5 suited, I assume. Maybe that's it. Maybe ace-3 off. Obviously, deuce-deuce or 3-3 is a possibility. And obviously, like, king-king is a possibility. Overpairs to my overpair. Also, I think sixes might be a possibility, though somewhat unlikely. Anyways, I think the most likely hand he has is air of some kind. I think that with a flush draw, he would call more often than raise, so I'm pretty comfortable not giving him credit for a flush if a flush hits. And again, with the disclaimer that I keep giving, this is based on average players and the little bit I know about him. You can learn a lot about people and their tendencies later on, and make decisions accordingly. Anyways, I decided to play this one pretty weird. Here is my thought process. If he does have something like ace-4 of hearts, ace-5 of hearts, I think he would play it this way. But other hard draws, maybe like other hard draws, I think he would just call. He has very few semi-bluffs in his range, I think. I think he has a lot of pure bluffs. If I call here, I do think he would bet a decent amount of turns, not a ton. But the problem with me calling here is that I rep, excuse me, I rep a hand like the hand I have, or better even, with the occasional like hearts or 4-5 or something. I rep a made hand. What I decided to do here was make a small raise so that I could rep air, so that I could still feasibly have air in my range. And what I was planning on doing was, if he shoved, or against most re-raises, I would fold. I think against some, I might have decided to call, or I don't know, probably decided to call against some, but usually I was going to decide to fold. But what I was hoping would happen is that he would float with like just a random hand that he decided to bluff with, just because it's so small and he'll get frustrated. I think people do that a lot. And then I was planning on calling a turn bet and potentially a river bet, kind of trusting my instincts on that. I think, I obviously feel obligated to tell you my thought process, and that's what it was, but this is one of those don't try this at home hands where, not that I'm saying I'm the only one capable of playing a hand this way, obviously anybody can, and I don't even know if it's the best way to play it necessarily, but it's a hand that if you are kind of, can't feel your opponent out that well in later streets, you'll get yourself in a lot of trouble, making a lot of mistakes. It's not, you don't have to play hands this way to win money at, even at as high as 50, 100, You just don't have to be a weirdo. You can just play hands normally for the most part. I think when I make videos, especially when I'm like two-tabling, I challenge myself a little bit to make more creative plays. And it's not plays that I wouldn't make necessarily normally, but I'm thinking harder. And so it's actually a good thing for me. And probably end up being bad for some of you guys. So 4 spades is not a good turn. He can definitely have 5-6 in his range. Wow. Excuse me. He can definitely have 5-6 in his range. But, I thought it was more likely that he had a lot, like, total air. I thought he might float the flop sometimes initially with 5-6 rather than raise, though he can definitely raise 5-6. Ace-5, I don't think he raises on the flop that often. He bets again, and I'm definitely calling the turn. I'm just trying to think about what kind of hands he could have, how he would play them, things like that. Queen River is not a good card once again. But that's only, the times that he has a queen and it goes check, check. Given his bet here, I don't really think he has a queen. He's betting 620 into 1725. I think that his most likely value betting hand here is a 3. Which is like a, whatever, random 3 that whatever 3s he plays pre-flop, I think play this way. Specifically maybe like a 3-5, I think is his most likely hand, because maybe an ace-3 or king-3 might bet bigger to get more out of another 3, either on the turn or the river. I was actually planning, I remember at the time, on the turn, thinking, I'm going to call the turn, and I feel pretty good about him bluffing the river, and me calling. And he bet 620, and I had a lot of second thoughts. Just because I think it's pretty obvious I have a made hand. If I had some kind of semi-bluff, I would be check-shoving the turn, most likely. And how many made hands can I bet 3-bet the flop with, this 9-9, as far as made hands go, is like... he shouldn't expect me to have a made hand this week. Sorry, just getting some water for the cough. In his shoes, I think he should expect me to have a hand like, I don't know, some kind of 3, like 3-6 or 3-7, something like that. Or potentially like 3-4, something slow played, something huge. So not a great spot to bluff. I could see him thinking I might have like a 4-5 or ace-9 of hearts, let's say. Even though I probably wouldn't play those hands this way, it's definitely reasonable that some people would and that he would think I would. So those are the reasons that I don't think he's very likely bluffing. God, excuse me. Those are the reasons I don't think he's very likely to bluff. Let's look at the reasons that I think he is likely to bluff. First of all, he's repping a narrow range. I don't think that he might think he's repping a queen here, but I don't think he is. I don't think he bets a queen here, because I don't know what he's expecting me to call him with. If he has a queen, I think he'd just take the free showdown, be happy, hit the queen, and hope it's good. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I think. So essentially we're looking at 3s and 6-5, ace-5. Deuce-deuce, 3-3, 4-4. He occasionally will be 3-betting the flop with his 3s. Like with most 3s, I think he 3-bets the flop more often than floats it. But, still floats it a decent amount of the time. But that takes some of those out of his range. The thing about my reasoning on the flop, and this goes back to the queen-jack hand where I led with king 7-3, and him, thinking about that, I think that it's very likely that he raised the flop with air. Very, very likely. And then when I re-raise, I think maybe, let's say 60% of the time, he has air and raised the flop. He's going to float with it. Obviously, random guess. But that's the best approximation I can give. So, on the turn, when I check to him, his complete range is massively weighted towards air. Maybe like 80%. So, the question is, how often is he going to bet the turn with that air? That takes a decent chunk out, because he's always going to bet with his big hands, almost always. Pretty much always bet with his big hands, and not always bet with his air. And then, how often is he going to bet the river with his air? And given the reasons I mentioned, sorry if this is getting long-winded, given the reasons I mentioned, about me looking strong, I don't think he's going to bet his air all that often. So that takes it down a notch. But, even still, that leaves a lot of hand combos. He just has so much air in his range that he, even if he's only bluffing his air a small percentage of the time, I think I have odds to call here. Given the pot odds he's giving me and the fact that he just has so much more air in his range, he doesn't need to be bluffing it all that often to make up for the times that he's value betting. Another factor that kind of tipped me towards calling is that I think that he would, at least some decent percentage of the time, bet bigger with his bigger hands, either on the turn or the river. So I took maybe 60% of his good hands out of his range. And I did end up being right. He had 10-9 spades. He did pick up a draw on the turn. But he did just pure float the flop. And, you know, I mean, in actuality I was right, but I think that's kind of a close spot. I just noticed when I moused over that he's from Moscow, which makes it more of a call. But the thing about being able to make calls like that is obviously analyzing range, but a lot of the time I'm going to be wrong there. More than half the time, you know, given that I tank the river, if I think I'm going to be good more than half the time, I snap call the river. So I obviously didn't think that I wasn't certain about my call. Some people see big calls like that and think, wow, how did he know? Obviously I didn't know. I thought I was probably beat. But given my pot odds, I thought I was good often enough to call. Anyways, you kind of have to have pretty thick skin about, and, you know, a strong ego, as far as calling, seeing a winning hand time and time again. Obviously, if it happens every time, you need to stop calling so much. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not going to be good there that often. I'm gonna have the worst hand more often than not, and I guess you just have to remember the good ones so that when I call 3 times in a row there and I'm wrong, I don't doubt myself too much and trust my judgment. Here I call with king queen pre-flop. 3 bet's fine, but I think call's more standard. Definitely more standard for me. This is a player that maybe c-bets too much. I think my standard here is to raise the flop, but I decided just to call. And I mean, whatever. I could go into reasons for, you know, pros and cons for calling and raising, but I think they're all pretty obvious, and it's not all that big a deal, all that big a decision. He checks the turn, and I think that he's not super likely to be check raising here, given stack sizes. And I very likely have the best hand. There are a lot of hands he can call me with, like, I don't know, 8-9. Just a lot of pair plus gutters, jacks, 10s, queens. God, my voice keeps cracking. It's kind of embarrassing. Here on the right table, I called a raise with aces. I was kind of hoping to induce some spewing behind me. Obviously, 3 bet's fine, call's fine. He bets flop and I call. Pretty standard, I think. This is the kind of board you can go to war on again with aces, and against some people be kind of comfortable about it. I think he has a little on tilt. He's saying here, someone started new tables with me. But anyways, I decided to call, play it kind of safe, and make decisions on the turn and river. He bets again, and I'm going to call again. I think it's entirely standard to call again. Here on the left, wow, sorry. Here on the left, I get check raise, pretty small, and it's pretty gross. The thing is, there aren't a ton of value hands in his range, as far as, like, hand combos wise, because I think his sets he bets more often than check raises, and his 2-pair, I don't think he check raises 7-8 here. I think if he checks, he calls. Even like king 8, if he played a pre-flop, I think might check call here. So, you know, really what I'm afraid of is a hand like, are basically straights. And there aren't a ton of hand combos of straights, but there are a decent amount on this board. Other likely hands, I don't think he's doing this with total air, are like gutters. He could have a gutter potentially, or he could potentially have just like a real big combo draw, ace-9 of hearts, something like that. Against his range, and the fact that I think he's more likely to play his straights this way than his combo draws or his gutters. I think that I just have to fold here. And it's unfortunate, but I just think it's the play. Here on the right, I'm debating Actually, I'm just thinking about the hand on the left, but I'm deciding whether to bet or check. He bet twice. There's 660 in the pot. And I was pretty worried about him. Not pretty worried, but somewhat worried about him check raising. I think that, he would be really happy to be able to own me back. So either check raise bluffing here or check raising for value with like a boat or nut flush even. That said, I don't think it's coming that often. But the main problem here is that, one, I don't think there are a lot of hands that he checks to call. For instance, King 10 or something like that, he would just value bet. Even a hand as weak as 10-9, he might value bet here. Any 6, he should value bet. 3-5, whatever, he would value bet. But that beats me, as does a 6, sorry. But hands like a deuce, I don't think he's betting twice unless it's... Yeah, I don't think he's betting a deuce twice. I was going to say unless it's like ace-deuce with ace of hearts, but he doesn't raise that pre-flop. The only real way I think he can call here is if he had a hand like 8s with a heart that he bet twice and now doesn't want to value bet. Or he has a hand like that backed into a 4 somehow. Or potentially some kind of ace high that just doesn't believe me. But the other problem is I called a 6-6 deuce flop, 2 hearts. Turn was a 10 of hearts, I called again. So if I don't have a pair, I think I have to have ace high here. Maybe like king queen with a heart at worst, but I think most of my range here is made hands, so I don't think I get a lot of value or get a lot of credit for bluffing here. So I think it's best to just check, show my hand down. I think I have the best hand most of the time, but that's not enough reason to value bet. I just don't think anything calls me. And so I did have the best hand, but it wasn't getting called. Raised the queens under the gun. So it does seem like he's bluffing a little bit. I think I should have taken a note on him that he two-barreled with... wow, he just got quads overboated. He two-barreled there with no outs at all. I mean, he probably thought he had overs, but... Queen Jack on the 6-6 deuce, 10, 3 heart, with no hearts. I think that's a losing play, and one that you should note, just because it's not, super standard. Here he's 3-betting. I think he's probably on tilt at this point. And I take a note on D-Rock here that he fast played 5-5 on 5-5-3. Because it's, not a way that everybody would play it. Kind of non-standard, actually. I think most people might raise the flop, but then would just call 3-bet. Given that you have an absolute lock on the hand. But he just shoved over a 3-bet. Which, I don't know, that's pretty interesting to me. King 9 offsuit in the big blind, I think is good enough to call, especially against players not on his A game right now. Jack deuce 3. This is another kind of like somewhat of a leveling spot where last time I kind of had a hand when I let into him. First time he doesn't know what I had. This is the third time. I don't know what he'll think necessarily, but I think he's not in a great mood, and I don't think this was necessarily the best lead. Problem was I guess I just didn't want to check call with king high, but felt that he was betting everything. So I'm still okay with the lead. Would have been okay with a check raise or a check call even. But if he's two-barreling queen jack on the other board, this might you might not be able to check call there because you're going to be faced with a turn bet too often. And on this river, nothing really missed except for like the total floats like 8-9, which are definitely possible given what we've seen, but I don't think it's it's going to happen often enough. I think ace high is a huge part of his range. So I guess the video's coming to a close. Got about 3-4 minutes left of gameplay. I mean, some things to take away from these two videos. Obviously, it helps to flop sets or river sets. I definitely ran really good this session. There are different ways of running good too. The fact that I was right with my 9-9 call down is, somewhat some skill involved, but there's also running good. Because, over half the time there I'm going to be beat, I think. And I was lucky that time I wasn't. I definitely... The most important thing I think you can think about that I talked about in these videos is the way that I take notes, and I think that most people don't really take notes the correct way. I'm all for a HUD. I think that it's a good tool, but it does slow you down a little bit, and you can't solely rely on it. I would use a HUD and take notes. I'd do both. That's what I'd recommend. And take notes of specific actions rather than just like general statements that you don't really learn much from. And then later on, you can use all those things together to learn a lot about somebody. And, we never did get to use a lot of these notes. Obviously, I just played for, less than... wow. I just played for less than an hour. Sorry, my cough's, getting worse at the end of the video, I guess, all the talking. And also, sorry I keep talking about my cough. It'd probably be better if I just ignored it. Here I 3-bet with 7-deuce, suited. In a vacuum, I think it's plus EV. Don't go overboard with it. Anyways, we never did get to use the notes. I am really curious on D-Rock's 3-betting tendencies, like I talked about in the first video, I believe. Just given the notes I have on, whether he overvalues, or not overvalues, but values 3-betting on the button, or he likes to 3-bet against under-the-gun razors, or he likes to squeeze, or all of the above, or some of the above. Which of those factors make him lean towards 3-betting or not 3-betting? And didn't learn a whole lot about GHTH, or Smitty, actually. Thousandaire we learned a lot about, though I guess I didn't note all of it. But, a lot of that could have been because he's on tilt. And a lot of times I will put that in my notes. If I have a note on somebody, I'd put some parentheses, may have been on tilt. And Tell a Friend, obviously, here was playing very unorthodox style. And, stuff like that's really important to know. Obviously, you would learn some of that with the HUD, because you'd get his stats pre-flop, which are probably something like, I don't know, 35-0. But it's still important to learn that stuff. I guess that's the end of the video there. So yeah, to sum up everything I already said. Oh, good to see you just sat at the left table. I didn't notice that before I left. That would have been actually kind of fun to play with him. Anyways, take good notes, run good, and make calls when you're right, and fold when you don't have the best hand. Thanks for watching, guys. Good luck.